So, are we ready to start? Sound is okay in the back? Okay. Okay, so today is December 8th, 2018, and we'll start with homage to the Buddha 3 times. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so today we come to Sutta number 61 in the Anguttara Nikaya, the book of the threes. And this has the sort of title, Sectarian. And the theme of the sutta, or the first part of the sutta, it's announced in the opening paragraph, where the Buddha speaks about three, what's called, translated here, sectarian tenets. And there's a note here to explain this term, the Pali term. Okay, this is a translation of the Pali term. Let me increase this a little bit. Okay, the Pali word is titayatanani. The ani just makes it a plural. The singular would be titayatana. Okay, and this is a compound, and the first part of this compound is the word tita, or Sanskrit tirtha. And the original meaning is the ford in a river, a place for crossing the river. And so the word came to be given an extended meaning in the Indian culture of the Buddha's time, to refer to the different, spiritual teachings that were being promulgated by the various teachers of the period. And these teachings came to be called Tita in the sense that they provided a ford, a place for crossing over the stream of defilements, or a place for crossing over the stream or the river of samsara in order to attain liberation. And so it came to take on this extended meaning of, call it a sect of spiritual teachings. And for some reason, the Buddha never speaks about his own teaching as a tirtha or a tita, but it's always used, we always come across in the Pali Suttas the expression anyatitya paribhajaka. The paribhajaka is the wanderers, the wandering ascetics. Anyatitya, belonging to other sects. And then those who are the founders of these tirthas, the founders of the spiritual teachings, are called Titakara in Pali, or in Sanskrit, Tirthankara. So those who formulate the views, who establish these sects, and then those who follow these sects are called Titiya, those who adopt the views of these teachers and follow the practices that they advocate. And so in the Buddha's time, there were about 6 other tirthas, at least 6 that are mentioned in the suttas. And amongst them, we find the teaching of the historical founder of Jainism, Mahavira, who in the Pali Suttas he's called Niganta Nataputta. The Jains in the Pali Suttas they're called Niganta, which means those who are freed from ties, from bonds. Okay, so in this sutta, the Buddha is going to examine three of the tenets or doctrines of these sectarian teachers, and then to show how when these teachings are examined and questioned and interrogated, and when you follow them through to their logical conclusion, they result in what is called here non-doing, which means akirya. The Pali word is akirya. And non-doing here, the sense of non-doing, is that you could say that when you take the principles of these teachings to their conclusion, one winds up with the conclusion that there's no point in really undertaking any kind of spiritual practice. That if you draw out the implications of these teachings, they undermine the effort that is needed to achieve liberation. Okay, so let's see what these three sectarian tenets are. Maybe you could see whether we have any sort of contemporary parallels or versions of these sectarian tenets. Okay, so one is a group of ascetics and Brahmins who hold and who teach such a doctrine as this: whatever a person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neutral feeling, all that is caused by what was done in the past. Now he's going to first enumerate all three of the doctrines. So this is the first doctrine. The second doctrine is that taught by other ascetics and Brahmins who teach that whatever a person experiences, pleasant, painful, neutral, all that is caused by the creative activity of God. And then there's a third group of ascetics who hold that whatever a person experiences, all that occurs without any cause or condition. Okay, so we take, now the Buddha's going to, here with this first paragraph, he sort of lays out the table of contents or the outline, and now he's going to take each position and then examine it and draw out its implications. Okay, so he says, I approach these ascetics and Brahmins who teach, whatever a person experiences, pleasant, painful, or neutral, all that is caused by deeds that were done in the past. And this is the position that was advocated by the Jains. So the Jains say that we are weighed down by the karma that we've done in the past, and whatever we experience, all that is just the fruit of present karma, or the fruit of past karma. And so for this reason, the ideal of the Jains, the sort of spiritual ideal, at least the way it's presented in the Buddhist text, is to cease completely from all activity. And so the ideal Jain practitioner, and I think that there are some Jain texts which do support this, is the one who just remains sitting in one place, doesn't do anything. And the ultimate ideal is the one, since even eating is an activity, eating to sustain the body, so the ideal practitioner is one who completely fasts to the point of death. And a lot of people interpret the Buddha's teaching of karma to mean that whatever we're experiencing in the present, all that is the result of our deeds in the past. But that is not the Buddha's position, as we'll see. What the Buddha teaches is that our karma from the past will produce some results in the present. Well, some of the things that we're experiencing in the present are the results of past karma, but not everything. Okay, so in this case, the Buddha approaches these ascetics and Brahmins, and first he inquires, because he's heard their position through word of mouth, so he says, is it true that this is your doctrine? And then when he's asked that, they say, yes, this is what we're teaching. So then the Buddha says, in such a case, then it is due to past deeds, to past karma, that you kill, destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, in violating their vow of celibacy or brahmacharya, speak falsehood, utter divisive speech, speak harshly, engage in idle chatter, are full of craving, full of ill will, and hold wrong view. So these are actually the these are the 10 unwholesome courses of karma. So if it's true that whatever we experience now is the result of what we've done in the past, then all of the activities that we engage in now are also the result of what was done in the past. Of course, in the course of these activities, we're undergoing particular experiences. So if I kill, that's an experience. And if that experience of killing is caused what was done in the past, then, in a sense, it's not due to my own volition in the present. So I'm determined to kill in the present. So you could see how this will undermine any kind of legal system, at least theoretically. So if somebody is a killer and he's brought up into a court of law, charged with murder, he'll appeal to the judge or to the jury. I couldn't help it, but this is the result of my past karma. My past karma has determined me to be a killer in the present. If I steal, then I couldn't help it. I was just determined to be a thief. If I'm a serial liar, always lying, I couldn't help it. That's the result of my past karma. Of course, according to Buddhism, what we would say is that our past activities create certain dispositions to act in certain ways. And so as we act in a particular way, then those past actions create kind of habit formations. Those habit formations exert a kind of pressure on the will so that we tend to act in ways that repeat our past habitual actions. But the Buddha doesn't say that our present actions are absolutely determined by our past actions, that we're just puppets helplessly in the grip of our past karma. Okay, so continuing. So he says, let's just get the Pali also. I have to say some of the Buddha's criticisms here are a bit on the harsh side. So he says, those who fall back on past deeds as the sara, that's the essence, the essential truth, have no desire to do what should be done and to avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. I'm not so sure that this is really true of many of the Jains. Though maybe it's a logical consequence of their position. Yeah, it says that for them there is no desire or effort with the idea that this should be done, this should not be done. Because the Jains, I have to say that a lot of the Jains live lives that are very, very admirable. They're maybe a bit on the side of the strict asceticism, but they do undertake restraint of the senses, they observe celibacy, they have various kinds of meditation practices. But the basic idea of Jainism, the way we find it presented in the Buddhist texts, is that the Jains engage in extreme ascetic practices with the idea that by these extreme ascetic practices, they can burn up or annihilate old karma. And so the problem for the Jains is the accumulation of old karma from the past that's weighing down on them, burdening them, and keeping them in bondage. And so the way to liberation is by burning up or destroying that old karma through the extreme ascetic practices and avoiding any kind of action in the present, because any action for the Jains creates new karma. And maybe the key difference from this perspective with regard between the Jains and the Buddha regarding karma is, for the Jains, any kind of action creates karma. Whereas for the Buddha, what is the essential factor in creating karma? Right, it's volition. Chetanahang bhikkhave kammang vadami. It is volition that I call karma. So for the Jains, if one is walking down the road and you step on ants that you don't see unintentionally, but you're creating negative karma. And so the Jain ascetics, even in India now, the Jain ascetics are still there. They use a kind of little broom to brush, whenever they go walking down the path, they brush the path in front of them to sweep away any kind of ascetics. And they'll wear, at least one of the sects of the Jains will wear a face mask, a white face mask, so that when they breathe in, they won't breathe any kind of microscopic microorganisms. And then if they breathe in the microorganism and kill them, also they're creating karma. And then there are two sects of Jains. You might know one is called the Svetambara. Ambara is clothes, garments, and Sveta is white. So those are the white garment ascetics. And then the other sect of Jains is called the Digambara. Dig is the sky, and Ambara is clothes, garments. So those are the ascetics who wear the sky as their clothes. In other words, those are the naked Jains. And there are some there are some Jain temples in the United States, but I assume that all of the Jain temples in the United States and Europe would probably belong to the sect of the white garment Jain ascetics. Because if they were lay followers of the sky-clad Jain ascetics, and they wanted to bring some of their monks over to the to the United States. Can you see them standing on this check-in line at the airport? And then you're sitting comfortably in your seat in the plane, and then a naked Jain ascetic comes and sits down next to you. Okay, so the Buddha now is arguing that those who fall back on past deeds, past karma, as the essence or the essential truth, have no desire to undertake any kind of striving, especially not the striving in the mind, or to avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. Wow, it's pretty hard. So then the Buddha continues, since they do not see as valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded. Mutta sati, which means that their sati, their mindfulness, is lost, that they don't have mindfulness. They do not guard themselves. And then the Buddha says, even the designation of samana should not be applied to them. Yeah, even samanavado, that's the term samana, or Sanskrit shramana, cannot legitimately be used in reference to them. Okay, so the Buddha then says, so this was my first sahadhammika. It means legitimate, reasonable refutation of those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view. Yeah, I remember actually back in 1975, when I was still a young monk, I had made a trip to India, and then together with an Indian monk, we made a trip to the Buddhist holy places, and then I went in the course of that trip, when we were staying at Bodh Gaya, then I made a side trip to the city of, well, first to the bamboo grove, where the Buddha had his main monastery outside Rajagaha. And then I met up with some Thai monks who were on that excursion. And then we went into the city of Rajgir, it's Rajagaha. And then just at this time, there was a big Jain festival, and Jain ascetics of the Digambara sect, the naked ascetics, had come from all over India. I think they come there by walking to assemble, maybe not from all over India, but maybe from northern India. And they come to Rajagaha for that major festival. And it was very impressive because I felt almost you feel like you're back in the days of the Buddha. Myself and the Thai monks are like Buddhist monks, and now we're seeing our fellows from the naked Jain community assembling. And the Jain lay followers are very devout and very friendly to us, to the Buddhist monks. But it was actually quite cold in northern India. This was in November, I think, early November. Right after the rainy season has ended, the cold season is beginning. And the temperature probably in Fahrenheit would be in maybe the upper 50s, middle 50s. But the Jain ascetics are just, completely naked. And they probably through their practice over the years, they build up a kind of resistance to that extreme cold. Okay, so this is the Buddha's refutation of those who hold that whatever we do in the present is determined by what was done in the past, by past karma, whatever we experience in the present. So in that case, I'm just the victim of my past deeds. I have no way to change myself. And so in that case, it would seem to follow that there's no point in making any kind of effort in my meditative practice, in my cultivation. Okay, the second group of Titayatana, the second sectarian group that the Buddha criticizes, are the theists. So these are ascetics and Brahmins who proclaim that whatever a person experiences is all caused by God's creative activity. Let's see, the Pali word here is Isara Nimana Hetu. And the word Isara, this is the Pali form, but the Sanskrit form is Ishvara. And this becomes the regular word for God even in contemporary Hinduism. I don't see any markers. Actually, I don't have to write on the board. I can type into a Word file. Yeah, the word is Ishvara. And then many Hindus now refer to, they call it the Maha. They put Maha, the prefix in front. Maha means great. So the great God, Maheshvara. And then this becomes a kind of epithet for Shiva. So this is Maha plus Ishvara becomes Maheshvara. Okay, then the word Nimana, that means creation or the act of creation, creative activity. Okay, so these are ascetics, teachers who say that whatever we experience, all that is, you could say, caused by the will of God. And so this might be a view that's held by many contemporary Christians or maybe Muslims. So whatever we experience is just sort of God's will. So we have to resign ourselves to it and accept it. Of course, let's say, I'm not an expert in Christian theology, not by a long shot, but mainstream Christian theology, it also gets into problems because it says God is omnipotent, so all-powerful, right? Then all-knowing, omniscient, and all-loving. Yeah, but omnipresence isn't necessary for the argument that I'm going to develop. Okay. Now the problem arises that it said that even though God is omnipotent, but he, in a sense, relinquishes some degree of his power in order to give human beings free will. Because if God exercised his omnipotence in all respects, then human beings wouldn't have any freedom, any moral freedom. We would just be puppets or slaves following the decree of God. And so, in order for God to establish a meaningful, loving relationship with human beings and to give meaning to human existence, he relinquishes some of his power to human beings so that human beings have free will. And they make their choices for good or for bad. And then, because they're choosing of their own free will, then God can, for those who do good, they get rewards, and those who do bad, they get punished. And if they're really bad, the punishment can amount to eternal torment in hell. If the reward is of the highest kind, then they get to dwell in God's presence in heaven. Am I stating this correctly? Yeah, some of you have gone through Catholic schools, so. Say? Yeah, I know the Calvinist would be that particular Christian sect which holds to predestination, that everything is determined in advance by God's will. But this is here the mainstream, yeah. But then the problem comes that God, though he relinquishes some degree of his omnipotence, so we say, maybe call this a modified omnipotence, but he still remains omniscient and supposed to be all-loving. So when he relinquishes some degree of his power to human will, he'll know in advance what decisions human beings will make. And so he knows that some people will choose to do bad deeds and will then have to face eternal torment in hell. So in that case, the problem is, how could he be all-loving? If he's all-loving, then he should want the best for everyone. And yet, if he wants the best for everyone, he shouldn't take that risk in giving human beings the free will to choose for good or for bad, because there are some, in fact, a lot, whose minds are going to be, whose will is going to be dominated by the sinful tendencies of human nature. And so they're going to choose the bad, and they're going to have to face punishment, and not simply a few slaps on the wrist or a few years in prison, but they're going to have to face torment in hell forever. So what happens to God's all-embracing love in that case? And if out of love, God were to decide, I can't risk letting human beings, these fallible creatures, make their own choices, so I give up that giving up of my omnipotence, and I say, okay, I'm going to create human beings, but I'm going to keep that omnipotence, and so I create human beings who are going to do only good deeds, beautiful and wonderful deeds, but they're not doing it of their own free will. And so in that case, it's like I'm a puppet master working the puppets, so I can make the puppets do whatever I want. But can I love the puppets for what they do? I make the puppets so that, they're very gentle, friendly, kind to each other. But the puppets are doing whatever my fingers determine they should do. And so can I love these puppets when they're just absolutely in my control, not doing anything on their own? And so then the idea of becoming all loving becomes problematic. And then of course the puppet human beings make only desirable choices, and so they get to spend eternity in heaven with me. But I was the one who sort of programmed them. It's sort of like programming again, using another analogy, it's like you program a computer to do what you want, and does it make sense to reward the computer for doing what you want? Anyway, so these are some of the problems with theism. Okay. Okay, so in the case with the theist, the Buddha again presents the same arguments. So in such a case, it is due to God's creative activity or God's will that you destroy life and take what is not given and so on. And so those who fall back on God's will as the essential truth have no desire to do what should be done or to avoid doing what should not be done. And then they don't make any effort in that respect. And so then the conclusion follows, even this designation, samana, ascetic, should not be legitimately applied to them. Okay, then we come to the third position, the third sectarian tenet. This is the position that whatever a person experiences, all that occurs without any cause or condition. This was the position, according to the Buddhist text, that was held by a teacher by the name of Makali Gosala. Whoops. And he was either the founder or at least the prominent teacher of a group called the Ajivakas, or the Ajivikas, which actually continued to exist in India for centuries. maybe down into the 12th century or so. And their basic claim, we find this in the Majjhima Nikaya. Let's see if I could get the full statement of their position. Hmm. I don't have it. Strange. Okay, anyway, I know pretty much I know what their position is, how to state it. So what they say is that all beings, all creatures, all living things are controlled by something called niyati, which you might translate as fate or destiny, that they have no power, no will, no control, no no will, no power, no strength, no inner self-control, but that we're all sort of the helpless victims of an impersonal force called niyati, destiny. I'll write that down. And so then they say that whether it's that there's a fixed length to our wandering in samsara, and when that fixed duration of our wandering in samsara comes to an end, then we are liberated, sort of automatically, whether we're foolish or wise, good or bad. When the fixed length of our wandering comes to an end, then both the wise people and the foolish are liberated. Yeah, there's no cause, no reason for the purification of beings, no cause, no reason for the defilement of beings. Beings are defiled without cause, without any condition. No cause or condition for the liberation of beings. Beings are liberated without any condition. There's no strength, no energy, no personal effort. All beings, all creatures, all living things are sort of helpless, powerless, without energy, and they are driven on by niyati, that's that fate, by sangati, circumstances. Okay, so that is the position, the fuller position of this group of ascetics. No, that's a different group, but they're not mentioned here. Here we have only 3, but we get in the second sutta of the Tiki-nipata, the Samanyapala Sutta. There we get all 6 of the outside ascetic positions. And also in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 76, the Venerable Ananda examines a number of those sort of heretical positions. Okay, so the Buddha approaches these ascetics and then he questions them in the same way, and then again concludes that even the personal designation could not be legitimately applied to them. So this is he says, this was my 3rd legitimate or reasonable refutation of those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this. Okay, so any questions at this point? Or comments?
I'm just astonished how profound the Buddha, I mean, his way of seeing it it's so rational. And then you look at these and you're like, how could the human mind wrap yourself? It's just like dogma being, you're fed dogma. Where
Like
the
what?
Buddha's, you're fed dogma, whoever's giving you that dogma, you're believing it. Whereas the Buddha's like, you can make sense, what he's saying. So it's just profound.
He uses this very rigorous method of
Very
sort of
profound.
analysis and logical sort of refutation. And is that Matt? Yeah.
Bhante, so you can see the 5 hindrances like sloth and torpor perhaps as a result of the karma that's preventing one from, exploring deeper into
I wouldn't say that when the 5 hindrances arise that those are the actual results of karma. What I would say is that those hindrances appear through the habitual conditioning of the mind. So, okay, sloth and torpor, maybe we'll put that one aside because that could tend to arise just through bodily unease. But let us say anger. So somebody is disposed to anger. So when they sit in meditation, then a lot of sort of angry and resentful thoughts come bubbling up. So those angry and bubbling thoughts, that's not that's not the vipaka, the result of past karma, in the sense that I've done deeds in the past and now they ripen in the form of those thoughts.
So one can't really describe what's happening in one's life to karma, to the working out of karma. You can't say, aha, this is because I had bad karma in the past, and that's why.
Yeah, one can't describe everything, and often I say that one can't know that a particular thing happens to one. One can't know with certainty this is the result of my past karma. Okay, let's say there's an automobile crash, God forbid, but it happens. And let's say I want to take a case where many people die. No, I don't want to take that case, but for the argument's sake, let's take that case. A plane crash. Okay, a plane crashes and let's say there's 100 people on board, 93 people die, 7 people survive. Can we say that the 93 people died together as a result of a past karma? Maybe, but I don't know. I'd be hesitant to say with certainty that everyone died in that plane crash because of past karma. Maybe some did in some cases. Maybe it was just like a natural event. And then the 7 people who survived, can we say that they survived because they had some good karma that protected them? Maybe, but maybe they just happened to be sitting in a particular position where they avoided the impact of the crash. Yeah. But there comes a tendency, I'd say, in popular Buddhism to ascribe all of those events to past karma. But I'm not sure that this is a position that can be taken out from the Buddha's actual teachings.
Bhante, which sect was it that the Buddha uses the metaphor of like a river, and what the sect purported was the soul is just like a stick drifting down a river?
That the soul is like a stick drifting down.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the Anguttara Nikaya. I think it's in the Book of Twos. It was talking about wrong view.
Yeah.
And it was either Gosala or, here, let me have the list. It was either Purana Kassapa or Makali Gosala's ideology, and it was that like the Atman is just a stick going along like the river Ganges.
I don't recall anything like that.
Maybe it's in a commentary I read.
Yeah, I just don't recall something like that.
All right.
That would be something, a much more specific statement of the view of either Makali or Purana Kassapa than I know from the text.
Yeah,
and I
just
think
remember.
that if I came across that, it would have stuck in my mind.
Yeah. All right. I'll try
Yeah,
and
you
look
just have
for
to
it.
find it and
All right.
show me the entire passage.
Okay.
Okay, see you.
Yeah, but like the first one, it felt very close to like the popular Sri Lankan Buddhism as well. Like everything happens due to past karma.
Yeah.
But the one interpretation though is instead of becoming inactive and try to burn up all the past karma, they encourage you to do good merit. So those good ones will come to.
That's true in popular Buddhism. Yeah, that one is encouraged to create good karma, to create punya or merits, because when those merits come to fruition, then they'll come to fruition in desirable results. So, Simon, he's right behind you.
Bhante, I'm wondering, what's your position about how much free will we actually have? And because I think a lot of times when we see a lot of kind of mentally disadvantaged people, mentally disadvantaged people,
I see, yeah.
and also we are born with our own prejudice.
Yeah,
I mean, how much free will we actually have?
Yeah. It's hard, to give to quantify the amount of free will that we have. But what I would say is that we inherit from ourselves, from our past lives, and also we're conditioned by our environment in certain ways, so that our inclinations, dispositions, traits of character are strongly formed by other factors. But don't forget that the traits of character are strongly formed by ourselves, by what we've chosen to do in previous lives. So those create, call them grooves in the mind, so that we're inclined to move in those grooves rather than against those grooves. They create a kind of grain, you could say, like the grain of wood. So we're inclined to move with the grain of our character rather than to go against it. But what I would say is that there's also always a certain margin of freedom in the present to make choices. And even when there's a pressure pushing us in one direction, we can choose to go in a different direction. That's how people transform their characters. But in the case of mentally disabled people, in their case, I would say that there's probably a karmic factor from the past which has strongly determined them in this way. So their amount of freedom is probably much more truncated, much more limited than for a person who doesn't have a condition like that. So let us go on, because I wanted to go into the next part of the sutta. And so now the Buddha he's finished his refutation of the 3 sectarian tenets, and these are should mention, just 3 of the tenets that were being circulated during the time he lived. But as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the discourse on the fruits of recluseship, that's Tiki-nipata number 2, there you get the Buddha's presentation of the teachings of the 6 non-Buddhist teachers. And then in Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 76, you get, I think, 4. This is Venerable Ananda is discussing 4 views that are the antithesis of the holy life, and then 4 other views that are unsatisfactory forms of a spiritual life. And amongst the unsatisfactory forms, we again find the Jain position, which is a position that the teacher claims to be all-knowing and omniscient, and yet when he wants to find a particular house, he has to ask people for the directions of the house. And then when he goes to a house on alms round, he might get bitten by the dog. And then he claims that I knew that there was a vicious dog there, but I had to be bitten by that dog, so I went there. Okay, so now the Buddha is going to present his own teaching, various aspects of his own teaching. So he says that now this Dhamma taught by me is unrefuted, undefiled, irreproachable, and uncensored by wise ascetics and Brahmins. Okay, and so what is this Dhamma taught by me? And again, he starts with a kind of what do you call this? A table of contents of what he's going to explain at length. So the principles of his teaching, the 6 elements, the 6 bases for contact, the 18 kinds of mental examination, and then the 4 noble truths. So all of these constitute this Dhamma that's unrefuted, undefiled, irreproachable. And you can see that all of these are principles that one could see and investigate in one's own experience. Okay, so first comes the 6 elements. Okay, so this is the Dhamma taught by the Buddha. And so what are these 6 elements? We have the earth element, the water element, the fire element, the air element, the space element, and the consciousness element. Okay, so first, the first 4 elements are what are called the great elements, the primary elements. Those are the basic building blocks of material phenomena. So according to the commentarial and abhidhammic way of explanation, we could say that there are 4 properties of material phenomena. So the earth element represents the property of hardness or solidity or resistance. The fact that when one compresses any kind of material phenomena, one meets with a certain resistance. And so it's said within the commentaries that the earth element, because it occurs in different degrees, so we have a spectrum between hardness as sort of the maximum concentration of the earth element, and then as the concentration of the earth element becomes diminished, we come to softness. So there's this polarity, dichotomy of hardness and softness. So those are contrasting properties of the earth element. But the primary property, according to the suttas, is this hardness or solidity or resistance. Then the water element, according to the commentarial way of explanation, is said to be the property of binding or cohesion. That particular property of matter that's responsible for the material particles binding together, cohering to form material objects. And so maybe if we do we have any physicists here? Nuclear substance? Okay, so I feel some comfort about speaking a little bit about contemporary physics, which I don't know very well, but there's a kind of subatomic particle called a gluon, and they called it a gluon because it functions somewhat like glue, which binds things together. And maybe just conjecturing that the function of the gluon is the function of the water element in the ancient Abhidhamma conception of matter. Okay, then, so according to the strength of the water element, when the water element is very strong, then the material particles will adhere together very tightly, so it's difficult to separate them. Whereas when the water element is weak, then the particles won't adhere together very strongly, and it's easy to separate them. So we could see this if we have wheat flour, and then we add water to the wheat flour, and then we knead it, and then we get the dough. And so if you blow on dough, the dough doesn't move at all. The wheat is bound by the water within the dough to stick together. But if we just have dry wheat flour on the table, and you blow on the wheat flour, then the particles of flour will just disperse. Then you have to sweep it up after. Okay, so that's the water element, the property of cohesion. Then the fire element is the property of temperature within material phenomena. And so we can experience this in the body as the fact that the body, or living body, has a certain warmth. Generally, if we use a thermometer, it's somewhere about 98.6 degrees. If you get a fever, then the fire element is agitated, and so it increases. Some people who are cold, then the fire element is diminished. And then even in things that are cold, they're cold because the fire element is weak compared to our bodies. But all material phenomena have some degree of heat. I think what they call absolute zero is probably the utter, total absence of the fire element. But I don't know if anything has ever been brought down to absolute zero. No? Not even in space, in outer space. Yeah, there must be even some degree of the fire element even in the depths of outer space. Okay, then the air element or wind element is the property of movement, and it's seen in expansion and contraction, and is felt as pressure, pushing and pulling. Okay, so those are the four primary elements. And then we have the space element. And the way the space element is explained in the early Buddhist texts, including in the Abhidhamma, it's not what we think of as the all-comprehensive space or absolute space, but it's the empty space between material units. So the space element here would be this empty space, say, within this cup, and in the body would be the empty space, say, within the ears, nostrils, mouth, organs inside the body. And then sort of at the microscopic level, there would be the minute, say, atomic and subatomic particles of matter. And then the space in between those subatomic particles would be the space element. And then here in this scheme, we have just the conscious element. So this is the vijnana dhatu. And if these six elements are going to be taken to be all comprehensive, then we would have to say that the consciousness element includes not only all the classes of consciousness, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness, but it should bring along with it or imply all of the other mental phenomena that are associated with consciousness, feeling, perception, and the various sankharas, various other mental activities. Okay, so these are the six elements. So you could see of these six elements, 5 of them are material elements, and then the only mental factor brought in is the consciousness element. So this is a very simple scheme. I suspect that the Buddha maybe picked this scheme up. Maybe it wasn't completely original to the Buddha. My suspicion is that it was sort of floating around, maybe amongst the Brahmins, from the Vedic, through the Vedas or the Upanishads. Because when the Buddha gives his, in most of the suttas, the Buddha uses more complex schemes of analysis in which greater weight is placed on the mental side of experience. And we find this, okay, well, here we have the 6 bases for contact. So these are the bases, we say the faculties through which the mind makes contact with the objects. So we have the eye as a base for contact, the ear, nose, tongue, body as a base for contact, and then the mind faculty as a base for contact. So these are the 6 internal bases of contact. So those are the 6 internal bases. And then corresponding to them, we have 6 external bases. What are the 6 external bases? Testing, testing. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, yeah. But more than light, but the visible, we call visible forms. Any kind of visible forms, sounds, odors, tastes, tactile sensations, maybe you say textures, and mental objects. And then we have 6 kinds of consciousness. And so the 6 kinds of consciousness, invert the order. So each kind of consciousness will make contact with its corresponding base through, each kind of consciousness will make contact with its corresponding external base through the internal base. So 6 bases for contact. And then we have 18 kinds of mental examination. The Pali expression here is mano upavichara. Yeah, mano is actually mano plus upavichara. And compound it becomes manopavichara. So there are 18 of these mental examinations. And what it means, okay, is that having seen a form with the eye, so through each sense, we'll have 3 kinds of mental examination. So having seen a form with the eye, one examines a form that is the basis for joy, for a happy feeling. Then one examines a form that is a basis for, here I use dejection, for an unpleasant mental feeling, some kind of annoyance, displeasure, dejection, sadness. And then one examines a form that is a basis for the feeling that's not pleasant, not painful. It's called a neutral or indifferent feeling. Here it's upekkha. Okay, so that is through the eye, and then through the ear, one has the same kind of 3 feelings, but 3 kinds of objects, which are the basis for the 3 kinds of feelings. So through the ear, through the nose, through the tongue, through the body as a sense, then having cognized a mental phenomena internally with the faculty of inner introspection or reflection, one examines a mental phenomenon that is a basis for joy, one that is a basis for displeasure, dejection, unhappiness, or a mental phenomena that is a basis for the indifferent or neutral feeling, equanimity. And so you could see, like, all of these are just, that we've come through so far, are very clear, straightforward ways of analyzing experience, showing its composite nature, and taking the concrete experience, sort of breaking it down to its constituents, and showing how the field of experience involves the interplay of sense faculties, the mind, and objects, and the objects themselves differ in their tone or their ability to trigger certain feelings. Okay, I think we're going to pause at this point, and then I'll ask for any questions or comments, and then we can continue next week with the rest of the sutta. Please feel welcome. Is that Matt? Did you? Okay, and please take the wireless mic.
Bhante, the feelings of joy or displeasure, isn't that like the Vedanas? And
It's not like the
Vedanas, the pleasure, pain, or neutral feelings are connected to the five aggregates affected by clinging.
yeah.
So that the joy is actually not something inherent in the object.
I see.
It's something that
I see.
we're adding to it, so it's not a fundamental in a way.
If I understand this, what I would say is that, let's see, the objects tend to be correlated with certain feelings. So, okay, let us say, okay, I go to a nice restaurant and we order a nice meal, and so they serve nice Indian meal or Chinese food or nice Mexican restaurant. Okay, so the food is well prepared. So that food, because it's very tasty and well prepared, so it tends to produce a joyful feeling. This would be in the case of having cognized an object through the tongue. One experiences an object productive of joy. So that object has a tendency to produce that feeling. Whereas, say, if I'm, in the private in the army, I haven't been in the army, or I'm locked up in a prison in a country where they treat prisoners very badly. They just put some slop in the dish and serve it. Okay, so that food, by its nature, is tends to be productive of dejection or displeasure. So the objects have those qualities, inherent qualities, to produce those feelings, but it's not determined that the object will produce those feelings. So maybe I go to a nice Indian restaurant where the food is very good, but I'm the kind of person who likes bland food. So my friends drag me to the Indian restaurant, but I want the bland food. So I eat the Indian food, and I don't like it. So most people are there enjoying themselves and take some of this, try some of that, but I don't like it, so it produces domanassa in me. Even though by majority vote, it produces somanassa, joy. And if I'm in the prison and I've cultivated my mindfulness of breathing to a point that when they serve the distasteful prison food, then I just develop equanimity towards it.
Right, developing equanimity, and because you want to avoid suffering, because
Yeah.
it's so wonderful, then you want it more, and
Yeah.
so avoid those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then in this case, one would say that there's a tendency to encounter the objects productive of joy, the pleasant objects, as the ripening of wholesome karma, and to encounter the objects that cause domanassa, displeasure, through the ripening of unwholesome karma. But again, the reaction to the object is not determined by one's past karma, but one can arouse or train the mind in such a way that one develops, instead of responding automatically to the stimulus, to the sensory stimulus, that one will respond differently from the way the stimulus is tending to produce the mental states. Okay, I think we should take a break now for the lunch, and then we come back and further questions and discussion, 12:15. And so let us end with the sharing of the merits. Yeah, I hear the... You see, for people out there, when they hear the gong, they become happy, joyful. It's a sound productive of joy. Now the meal is ready. But when I want to do the sharing of the merits, at the same time that the sound, I hear the sound, then it becomes productive of, why are they continuing to bang it so long? Productive of domanassa, displeasure. Okay, but we will develop upekkha, equanimity, and recite the sharing of the merits, regardless of the gong. Okay, so we're sharing the merits with the devas, the Dhamma-protecting devas, the nagas, or dragon spirits, the bhutas, the fierce spirits, and with all beings. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata Deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya bhavagupadaya avichiyetato etantare satakayupapanna Rupya rupicha asanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. Okay, we could stand and do three half bows.
Bhante, it's your birthday on Monday.
Is it really?